Here to help us clear some of the confusion behind dementia and other examples of cognitive decline is Dr. Jim Bragman from Corewell Health. Dr. Bragman, thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure to be here, Tyler.
Yeah, happy to have you on as we talk about particularly dementia, because this is something that affects a large swath of people in a number of different ways. It has a number of different ways that it manifests. But let's start off with some of the common misconceptions or misinformation that may be out there regarding dementia that you sometimes encounter in your practice or when people are talking to you about this condition.
Sure. One of the common questions is, what is mild cognitive impairment or just normal senior living versus true progression or a beginning of a dementia? Having an occasional proverbial, we call a brain fart, as you get embroiled in day-to-day activities, you're very, very busy, does not mean that one has dementia. Dementia is when you're forgetting things, you're repeating yourself, you get lost with cars. That's it's in phases. In a case like you watch President Biden, the gait is clearly off. It's getting aggressively worse. So it's a broad spectrum. At the age of 65, maybe 5% of people have dementia. At the age of 70 to 75, the numbers are around 20%. And if you're fortunate to make it to 85, 50% of people have some form of dementia. So the fact that you make it to 85 and you have your faculties is not a rare phenomenon entity.
And that's why it's important to talk about this too, Dr. Bragman, because we know that as you age, your faculties do start to decline a little bit. Sometimes that happens earlier on, as you said. Sometimes that happens very late in life, or even in your late 80s and into your 90s. And so as people may be showing these signs throughout their age, how do they tell the difference between it being basic aging process or the signs of a dementia?
Often the family members are instrumental in helping this evolve. What happens a lot of times with dementia patients, they will try to cover up or deny events that they forgot to place something. They'll make excuses. When you joke about it, you probably are in an earlier phase, or maybe it's a benign entity. Family members will often say there's problems with driving, or a person's personal hygiene deteriorates, or they're asking the same questions over and over again, and their judgment progresses and becomes progressively worse.
And so what's the diagnosis process like for that? How do you determine when, from a medical standpoint, when it is dementia, or how severe that those symptoms may be?
Let's just, dementia is the general rubric overall character. The number one cause of dementia is Alzheimer's disease. Everybody has. This is a neurological deterioration. We have your brain cells that we call neurons. They come entangled. The medical term is beta-pleated sheets, and the fibrils, the fibers that make up the nerve cell, are called amyloid. As this evolves, they get into something called tau protein. So this clinically presents itself as being forgetful, judgment being off, a gradual progression of lack of evolution of personal care. So Alzheimer's is number one. Number two are multi-infarct or multiple stroke dementia. Some people have a combination of both. So the three most common forms. 30% of people with Parkinson's disease have some form of dementia, so they evolve over time. Not everybody, but about 30%. Other causes, the famous Jakob Creutzfeldt, that was the national scare with the tainted meats that started in Seattle, Washington, and they had to kill a lot of animals in funeral pyres. There's B12 folate deficiencies. There's problems with thyroid that can cause change of, so we look for reversible causes. Another thing we look for is depression, which we often can be pseudodementia. It's like a person that has dementia, but really, it's the number one cause of mental illness in seniors is depression. They may have trouble concentrating, they may not be focusing, they may not have dementia, but the two are nonetheless are not mutually exclusive as well. requires a skilled clinician to try to sift through all these entities.
Dr. Jim Bragman is with us, an internal medicine specialist in West Bloomfield, who's also associated with the Corewell Health System and William Beaumont University Hospital as well. Dr. Bragman, as we talk about dementia, and you mentioned some of the risk factors that come along with it, or may put someone more at risk for dementia, how much of this development is genetics versus lifestyle, or better yet, how much does lifestyle play into your likelihood that dementia could creep up later on in your life?
It's a great question. Things that we can control, without question, are your blood pressure is number one. Your cholesterol plays a role. What's often in the news, there's a special carrier protein called aproprotein E4. And there has been some studies in the last couple of weeks in one of our prestigious journals, the New England Journal of Medicine, where we have two of these copies we call alleles. It gives you a greater genetic predisposition towards dementia. What does, there are pockets that run families. The most important thing from a preventative standpoint are the following, and this was really done on a very elegant study years ago on Carmelite nuns in Minnesota, who was the least apt or the most apt to develop dementia or perhaps delay it till later in life. The people who are the most verbal, the most reading, did crossword puzzles, Sudoku. People who are the most physically active, you can delay the onset or hope to prevent it by walking counts, a stationary bike, a treadmill, swimming, any type of physical activity is of paramount importance. Third, eating healthily. The more you go towards the Mediterranean, vegan, plant-based diet, the less chance you have. Fourth, relationships are very important. You know, we always talk about families being somewhat dysfunctional, and it's important to have family relationships, but a network of friends is of considerable importance. And finally, I noticed that people who have coping mechanisms, when adversity strikes, you have the wherewithal to handle adversity and to overcome obstacles in life without giving up. And if you have some of the diseases like diabetes or hypertension, you've got to keep them under control.
And so knowing that our population in the greater West Bloomfield area, there's a large population of elder individuals, and often when there's a dementia diagnosis or a diagnosis that maybe also suggests that dementia may be in play down the line, how much does family support play into the treatment of dementia and better outcomes for our patients?
Enormous, because families have to be involved. I mean, my mother had a stroke, but in watching 12 years at West Bloomfield's nursing home, people who had family visited on a regular basis deteriorated at a slower rate than people who were by themselves. And also people who walked around, exercised, progressed slower than those who were left to their own wills.
And lastly, Dr. Bragman, what sort of resources are available for those that maybe have been diagnosed recently with dementia or maybe showing some of those signs to help them get the treatment, get the help they need, and live as normal and as healthy of a daily life as they can?
From a familial standpoint, the Regional Alzheimer's Association is located in Southfield, so they have wonderful resources. There's a book called the 25-Hour Day, which prevents some family burnout. From the patient standpoint, you have to get it to a competent physician who knows something about geriatrics, who has a background, knows how to do the appropriate test, you know, whether you need an MRI or a CAT scan, whether you need a PET scan to see what the brain flow studies, who how to do the proper workup, and try to empower people to not give up, keep people oriented for as long as possible, keep them in Brown centers that we have here in West Bloomfield are very good. If you do have the misfortune of dementia, it gives the family a break. It keeps our patients involved and getting some socialization as well.
Dr. Jim Bragman is with us, an internal medicine specialist from right here in West Bloomfield, as we talk about dementia and cognitive decline. Before we let you go, any lasting advice for those in our local area that may be affected by these conditions?
Key is our treatments, and right now we cannot cure this dreaded disease. It leads an inexorable downhill course. People ask me, I don't know how long it will be. We do have some medications. We only have a few. We have ribostigmine, an Exelon patch. Aricept nasopil, and a medicine called memantidine. Some of the injectable ones that got FDA approval, I'm not impressed with. They're horribly expensive. They require a lot of care, and the amount of improvement at the expense of us, I'm not a real big advocate of. But the key for family is, I always say, stay alive as long as you can. We don't know when the next great breakthrough is, and there's a lot of clinical trials. It's a hotbed of issue by the National Institute of Health and dementia centers, neurology centers, because it is such a prominent and prevalent disease.
Well, Dr. Bragman, we appreciate your time today, and thank you for your insight as we talk about what is a complicated issue for individuals and certainly for families and loved ones as well.
My pleasure. Thanks, Tyler.